Okay, so obviously the whole Last Jedi Star Wars thing has been beaten to death. But I wanted to tell you what should have happened, and I want to hear from you guys what you think of this if this had been what they had done. Some of this stuff was supposed leaks and stuff like that, but as it turned out, maybe that's bull because the movie sucked and none of these things were in it. But here's the deal. So The Force Awakens, leave it as is. It's fine. It's a rehash, but it was set up very nicely for what I'm going to say now, not for what was actually done. And again, you can add your tidbits and what you think of this in the comment section. So you can use all the same sets, you can use all the same characters, everything can be the same, but here's the plot changes that would have made this movie phenomenal. Right up there with probably Empire, in my opinion. So, Luke is training Rey on the island. He senses in the Force that something's wrong with Leia. And what's really happening up in space across the galaxy with Leia and the fleet is Snoke does show up with what he has left after the Starkiller base is destroyed, and he defeats the rebels. A small amount of them get away, but he ends up abducting Leia, and that was his whole goal. It wasn't to destroy the rebellion necessarily. He just wanted Leia so that he could get Luke to come to him. So what happens? So Luke leaves the island with Rey after more than a day's training. There's some significant training going on, and without all the negativity about the Jedi this and the Jedi that, he's his old self. Now he's going to go and try and save his sister. He goes to Canto Bight. So instead of having what's his name and what's her name going there, he goes there, and what he discovers there is the answer to this question of where the First Order comes from. What he discovers is that Snoke owns that planet, and he also owns basically all of the casino planets in the galaxy, and that's how he funded the First Order, and he was building it prior to the Empire even being destroyed. To me, that's a pretty cool concept, and it kind of gives credence to why this guy has so much power and how this order even came to be. So he's been collecting money from all these hundreds, maybe even thousands of planets. So through that process, Luke makes that discovery. And what would be kind of cool is that some of that information is gathered through using Chewie as muscle and kind of shaking down some of these high rollers. It would also give the scene so much more credibility and less cheesiness, because the whole thing was just so cheese. There was no real, harshness to it. So anyway, he gathers this information on Snoke. Basically, Luke goes to Canto Bight to figure out who this guy is, who this Snoke guy is that's after his family. Because he just senses that this is the place where the information is going to come from, and that's exactly what happens. He gets that information. He now has an understanding of who this guy is to some degree. He also maybe comes across another character that reveals more about Snoke's power, really setting up maybe some sort of bounty hunter or something like that really, really, sets up Snoke as so powerful that it's just like crazy. Like he's beyond anything anyone's ever seen before. Maybe somebody from the old trilogy that's been around, that's seen a lot of stuff, something like that would be kind of cool. Sort of like how they brought in, they had the Moth at the beginning of Force Awakens with Rey, kind of like somebody who'd seen a lot of stuff. Then what should happen is, he then leaves there. He's preparing himself on the way to the dust planet, whatever the heck it was, with the red crap. The red dust, I don't remember. I don't know the names because, quite frankly, I was so mad at the movie I forgot most of this stuff. But anyway, so they go there. So he's physically there. He's not a hologram. He's actually there, and he's got to figure out a way to save Leia. So, falling into Snoke's trap, he sneaks onto him and Rey, and Chewie. They sneak onto the huge ship, Dreadnought or whatever, and they find their way into his throne room, and of course he reveals himself. And this is where you have this sort of massive "I'm your father" type moment. For me, this is what I thought they should have done and was set up nicely in The Force Awakens, which is he's got Luke in his presence, Rey's with him, and he says, and he tells Luke that he is the one who seeded Shmi, that he seeded the Skywalker line using the Force. And that would make him Plagueis, and who cares? He doesn't have to look like Plagueis looked in some alternative universe book that's not canon anymore anyway. So that was already taken care of. And that's a huge thing, because now all of a sudden Luke is speaking to the person who created his father, and has to face him. So of course they have a fight. Rey takes on Ren. He takes on Snoke. Ultimately, Kylo and Snoke more or less win, which I think is a good thing. It sets up Episode 3 better, just like Empire. You have some sort of victory for the dark side. So they essentially win, but Luke and Rey are able to get away with Leia, having Chewie helping them. They end up getting out of there with Chewie, and they go down to the Rebel base, where all the other people are waiting and hiding. And Rey begins to question Luke as to what her origins are. And Luke reveals to her, this is sort of the in-between before the Empire comes to attack the base, he reveals to her that Han and Leia could be there in that scene too, to make it really palpable. And if you remember, there was the family music played in Force Awakens when Rey and Leia hugged. And Star Wars was always done like live theater, where the music gave you very huge indicators. Lucas always played certain music for certain times to give you an indicator of what was going on. The family music played for Leia and Rey, so how could Rey not be related to her? So what Luke and Leia reveal to her is that Snoke had abducted Ben or Ren as a kid, or as a 12-year-old or something like that. He's a little bit older than her, maybe 6-7 years older than her. Abducted him, and so they sent her to Jakku, and they had to give up the Falcon for her to go there and be protected, to save her from Snoke potentially getting her too. So rather than it being this failure of Luke as a teacher for Ren, it's more of a failure of Luke and Han and Leia in keeping Ren from being abducted by Snoke, or Ben Kenobi from being abducted by Snoke, which again gives the former trilogy characters some clout. Instead of being these bums, they're still good people. They just, stuff happened. And at that time when that happened, Luke didn't understand where Snoke got his power from, or didn't understand him, and didn't understand the whole casino connection and the money and everything else. So it happened. To him, he was just a Sith Lord that abducted Ben Kenobi. And so she finds out that she's Ben Kenobi's little sister, which would also make sense that she kind of sensed that in The Force Awakens when she's saying, oh, take off your mask and you're this and you're that. That was a very brother-sister exchange. And Ben would know that she's his sister. And she would know too, but be unsure, because she was old enough when she was left on Jakku to kind of understand. It looked like she's like 5 years old or something like that. But she just needed that confirmation from Luke. So she kind of already knew in that scene, and you can see it's very, like I said, brother-sister style dialogue, almost like they knew each other. So again, it really sets up this particular plot line. And so then what happens is Luke does go out, exactly like they filmed it, and face the cannons from all the walkers and all that stuff, but it's actually him. So instead of a hologram, he's so powerful, which he needs to be because Snoke is obviously extremely powerful, that he actually blocks the lasers with the Force. He's not a hologram. He blocks the lasers with the Force. He fights Ren. He fights Ren off. He gives the rest of them time to get out the back door where Rey can do the rock thing. They can all be the same. It's fine. It's she's a Mary Sue, but you can live with it at least because she's only a Mary Sue in the context of her teacher now, and he's bringing her to that level, and that's great. That's what you want in Star Wars. And maybe Luke does sacrifice himself and let Kylo Ren defeat him. I can live with that if it means he saved all those people and kept the rebellion alive, or the resistance now. Why they have to change the name, I don't know, but whatever. And then you would have, or what I would have preferred is he lives through it, but he gets beat down pretty good, but he gets out of there, because by the time he faces Ren, he's faced all that, his force powers maybe are diminished, whatever. And maybe he survives. I would have liked to have seen that. He gets out of there, and the end of the movie is that the Empire has actually seen a victory, because they've dwindled the rebellion down to next to nothing. Luke is weakened. And you move into the next film fully understanding that Snoke is Plagueis, fully understanding the power that he has, fully understanding that the rivalry between brother and sister is very real here, fully understanding, bringing it to another level now with the Skywalker family, where Luke and Snoke are against each other, and this is the guy who seeded the Skywalker line, so it's a whole other level for this family. You can move on to the new characters, no problems, because you've got Rey and Ben as Skywalkers, which was Lucas's whole vision from the beginning. I don't know why Disney felt like they couldn't go with that and continue making more trilogies. Like, why? Like, we have to kill the Skywalker, kill the past. Like, why? Like, you could have continued this going on to another trilogy. So then in the third film, you can have a scenario where Snoke and Luke face off. One of a really old leak that was supposedly a episode 7, 8, 9 thing from that Lucas hand wrote, I saw years ago, and it talked about how the reason that the lightsaber was found was because the Empire also found Luke's hand and had cloned Luke, and there was this whole scenario where you could see Luke facing his younger self with Snoke on the throne, and he has that power to do that, and trained a clone of Luke, which then also ties in the prequel trilogy with the cloning. There was a lot of things you could do, but you could have in the end, in episode 9, Luke sacrifices himself. You still have Rey and Ben. Snoke dies, hopefully, right? And you continue on and do a whole other trilogy. You didn't have to kill the Skywalker family to do that. I think that would have been a sick movie. You would have had all the things you had in Empire. It would have been awesome. And we would look back and say, yeah, Force Awakens, okay, it's a rehash, but it set it up nicely. And instead they went the dumb social justice warrior and everybody hates it. Way to go, Disney. Good job.